like she said, my name's Ashley Lick, and I'll be doing my UD presentation on the power of their ideas, lessons for America from a small school in Harlem. So, to start, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the author. Deborah Meyer spent more than 40 years working in the field of public education, holding several roles, including teacher, principal, writer, and advocate. She ranks among the most acclaimed leaders of the school reform movement in the United States. She's a graduate of the University of Chicago and is currently a senior scholar at New York City's Steinhardt School of Education. She is a co-founder and board member of the Coalition of Essential Schools and has authored many books and articles, including this book, The Power of Their Ideas, and In Schools We Trust. She is the recipient of a MacArthur Genius Award for her work in public education. But one of her most notable achievements is the founding of the Central Park East Schools and the great success that has brought. So, what exactly are the Central Park East Schools? The original Central Park Elementary School was founded in New York City's East Harlem School District in 1974. It was based upon the ideals of Dewey and Piaget and sought to create a democratic community that focused on creating community-centered education. It has demographics similar to the others in the surrounding area, so nearly half African Americans, 1/3 Latino, and the remaining were white or other. In a situation where they were expected to fail, their organization and instructional methods and techniques proved highly successful in every study that's been done. The school was formed as an alternative school, but alternative's not really used in the typical sense of the word here. Instead of being the last resort for troublemakers or at-risk students, it's just a different type of school than we would normally find in mainstream education that uses progressive ideas and methods to educate students. The methods used in this school proved to be so successful at Central Park that 2 other elementary schools were opened and an acclaimed secondary school. Meyer used these schools to implement her ideas of educational reform. They were widely successful with the Central Park East schools, and she believes that they would have the same effect if the whole country were to adopt similar reforms. So Meyer's theory of educational reform pretty much has 5 main aspects. She thinks that all schools should be public schools. They should be small schools, schools of choice. There should be respect for various aspects of diversity and ideas, and curriculum should be made relevant and have real-world application. Meyer believes that not one of these elements alone can change the face of education, but that combined, true reform can be accomplished. So the first factor in Meyer's reform plan is that she sees the future of education in public schools. Although the system is flawed, she believes that it can be revitalized to provide hope for children in our schools. And that's one thing she and I have in common. I believe that the public schools in this nation have great potential, but they would be successful if their good intentions were just put into practice correctly. We differ, though, in that she thinks that public schools should be the only choice. She's an advocate for keeping education a public responsibility instead of a private venture for profit or something that can only be attained by a small elite. According to Meyer, private schools and charter schools are not an answer to the nation's education problem, but rather a further distraction from the real issues. In her book, she writes, "Schools embody the dreams we have for our children, all of them. These dreams must remain public property. Holding fast to the democratic promise of public education requires something hard but simple, a steadfast belief in the process of democracy, warts and all. It requires rejecting both the dictatorship of the marketplace and the dictatorship of the expert." But more than just schools being public, though, she thinks that it's more important how the schools are organized and run. The next element in Meyer's plan for educational reform is that all public schools should be small. But just how small is small? She thinks that no more than 400 students should form a relatively small community that facilitates interaction and strong relationships between students, teachers, and parents. And these are just a couple of samples from different schools across the state. So Tupelo High School has 1,984 students, which would be almost 5 times as many as she says should be in one school. Starkville High has almost 1,200, so about 3 times as many. Louisville High School is in my home district, and they have 468, so they're about right there at the number that she suggests. She says that although a major goal of schools today seems to be to have the biggest schools and the most number of students possible, maybe it should actually be the opposite. She thinks that bigger doesn't necessarily mean better. To support her claims, she writes, "In schools, big doesn't work no matter how one slices the data. Large schools neither nourish the spirit nor educate the mind, except for a small elite who run the place and claim falsely to know everyone. What big schools do is remind most of us that we don't count for a lot." She then goes on to give 6 main reasons for having small schools. The first is that in small schools it is possible to experiment with ideas without feeling that the students are being treated like guinea pigs. So if something doesn't work, you have a small school. You can just call a faculty meeting and change it. The second is that the faculty must have access to each other's work in order for them to be held responsible for their work both individually and collectively. So in small schools, the teachers, they know each other. They know which ones are doing their job. They know which ones are late consistently, don't do anything for their students, but they do know the ones that are going the extra mile and actually making a change in these students' lives. The third reason is that small schools mean that we can get to know a student's work and the way he or she thinks. And in order to do this, it takes time. The students can't just be another face in the classroom that you see every day and maybe learn their name by the end of the semester. Another thing that she mentions is that small schools offer safety, plain, ordinary, and physical safety. She says that they offer what metal detectors and guards cannot, the safety and security of being where you are known well by people who care for you. The fifth reason for small schools is that the teachers are more accountable to the parents and the public and can't rely on a system of complex governing bodies to hide behind. Since in her model of reform, there's no real hierarchy of administration, the teachers pretty much collaboratively run the school. And since there's no administration, the teachers can't use isolation or distance as an excuse for accountability. Every teacher knows the children and is involved in their education in some way or form. And lastly, only in small schools can we truly place students in a culture that adults have shaped. So in other words, we need schools to be small enough that we can create strong and authentic relationships with our students that not only promote their learning, but play a vital role in actually shaping their lives. And although I can't really relate to the whole no administration thing, I can definitely relate to the benefits of a small school because my school had about 500 students, kindergarten through 12th grade. So we were well under Meyer's idea for a normal-sized high school. We made Louisville look really big. So. And then with smaller schools, though, comes the necessity for more schools because you have more students and less availability for them to be in the same school. So she addresses this and says that the parents and the students should be able to choose what school they go to. According to Meyer, district lines often only serve to reinforce racism because the lines are often drawn to keep the students with the highest socioeconomic status in the best schools and those with the lowest in the poorest schools. Eliminating these lines and allowing for choice means that families would be able to locate a school whose pedagogy and values they align with. Parents should choose where they feel their child would best fit, thrive, and succeed. My one concern with this idea is that if we allow school choice, many districts might just self-segregate, so it would be just implicit segregation instead of the lines being drawn for them. I don't think that we would really have any more diversity now than we already do. And although Meyer says that in order to make this choice effective, we have to have guidelines that promote social, ethnic, racial, and academic diversity, she doesn't really ever give of what that might look like. So with more diversity, though, would come the need for more respect. And then we have to respect our students enough to provide them with a quality education that will prepare them for a life outside of school and standardized tests. We have to stop, in order for us to give our students a quality education, we as teachers must make the curriculum relevant and learning authentic. We have to stop justifying curriculum on the basis that it's required for the next grade or that it's sorry. I skipped.
That's okay.
Meyer says that a positive school environment will foster trust and mutual respect between peers, students and teachers, teachers and parents, and so on. In order for this trust to be established, there must be a collaboration on all ends of the spectrum and a willingness to work together toward a common goal of education. So we have to be able to respect all individual differences between people, whether it be race, background, ethnicity, culture, exceptionalities, or just any other individual difference. And then comes, we must respect our students enough to provide them with a quality education that will prepare them for a life outside of school and standardized tests. In order for us to give our students a quality education, we as teachers must make the curriculum relevant and the learning authentic. We have to stop justifying curriculum on the basis that it's required for the next grade or that it's just something we're required to teach. Just a couple weeks ago, while I was observing a class, one of the students asked why any of this was important, and the teacher told them that it really wouldn't matter in real life, but they needed it for their 9 weeks test, and that they needed it for their next grade, and they needed it for their test at the end of the year. So instead of doing this, we have to make curriculum meaningful to the students. Not until they see a connection as to why they're learning will they actually want to learn and have a part in their own education. Until we accept the challenge to find better criteria for defining what's worth knowing, we will continue the already broken cycle. So, what would relevance and authentic learning look like in a mathematics classroom? The National Council of Teachers of Mathematics published an executive summary of their standards, and some of them say a high school mathematics program based on reasoning and sense-making will prepare students for citizenship, the workplace, and further study. Reasoning and sense-making should be a part of the mathematics classroom every day. Curriculum, instruction, and assessment form a coherent whole to support reasoning and sense-making. So that sounds a lot different than just learning to the test and learning it for the next grade. One way to implement this in a mathematics classroom would be to use another one of Meyer's ideas, the 5 habits of mind. And they're closely related to the elements of critical thinking. And the first one is the question of evidence. So how do we know what we know? The second one is the question of viewpoint. So who's speaking and from what perspective is it coming from? The third is the search for connections and patterns. So what causes what? The fourth is supposition. So how might things have been different? And the fifth is the end all be all. Why any of it matters. So really, just who cares? These habits of mind can be useful in helping students to question not only their individual work, but the works of others, as well as mathematical theorems and statements. Being able to reason abstractly and make sense of equations and examples will go much further than memorizing enough information to do well on a test. On a whole, this will benefit students not only in the mathematics classroom, but also in every other aspect of their lives from now on. While all of these elements are a part of Meyer's plan for bringing about educational reform, she realizes that none of that matters and none of the changes matter if we don't have teachers who actually want to bring about change. They have to genuinely want progress and be willing to do the hard work to get there. They have to change how they view learning itself, develop new habits of mind, and develop new habits of work. There's always more that can be done for our students. We just have to be willing to put in the extra work. It's not easy, but our students have to be worth the effort. So the question is not, is it possible to educate all children well, but rather, do we want it bad enough? And if so, where do we go from here so that our students will be able to truly see the power of their ideas?